or maybe 3 times. The other Gospels do not. So after the first chapter of John, which is long, has a lot of stuff in it, at the end of that time, Jesus returns to Galilee, and some of his early disciples go with him to Galilee. And so we're told after the 3rd day of his return to Galilee, this happened. There was a marriage feast, and the life of a Judean, or even Judean, and Galilean particularly, peasants was pretty drab. Not much fun, not many parties, not much celebration, not much fun. It was pretty hard and drab. And so a wedding feast was something that was loved and attended by all. A wedding. And you can tell by the scripture that was read this morning that sometimes the wine flowed pretty freely at those, and so they went gladly. So we're told that after that Jesus' mother was there, it was a family thing. Some of his disciples were there, and Jesus was there. Please note how many times we find Jesus at places of celebration. It's not by accident that he entered into the life of celebration, of fun, of fellowship with people. And there, once again, at a wedding. But this wedding ran into a little bit of a crisis. In the middle of the celebration of the wedding, there was a crisis, and it was reported to the mother of Jesus. Jenna, tell us what happened, what Mary did, and how he responded.
Yes, so this story, it's interesting because we all think we know it. We know, oh, the water into wine. It's been so told so many times. But it's interesting when you actually read it again slowly and read it closely. And I think that's a problem we have with Scripture is we think we know it because we've heard it 1,000 times and we've grown up with it. And so we get kind of lazy when we read it because we think we know what it's going to say. So one of the things I really enjoyed reading this with Emil because we both saw different things, and since we were reading it together with fresh eyes. So yes, Jesus, they're in Cana, and they're at a wedding, and the wine runs out. Okay, so this happens, and so it says when the wine was gone, Jesus' mother Mary, and let's stop here and think about Mary. So the last time we really thought deeply about Mary was at the birth of Jesus, right? So we still kind of have in our minds young Mary. She is a young mother. We really, the nativity story and the months leading up to that, when the Annunciation and she learns that she'll be bearing Jesus, this is kind of the next, that's the last time we really remember her. So now we see her as an adult, as a middle-aged woman who has an adult son, and that's a part of Mary that we don't often take time to really let sink in, that she has grown up. Jesus is now an adult, a grown adult, and so now we see her in this setting, and they're at a wedding together. So I think it's interesting that John says Jesus' mother. He doesn't say Mary. It's almost like he doesn't want to assume that you know her name, maybe. There's different ways to read that. We don't really know. But John says, Jesus' mother, who we know is Mary, said to him, "They have no more wine." Now, when she says this, we don't really know her intentions. We think that she was probably, looking at him saying, okay, they have no more wine. You could fix this. So, but there's a variety of interpretations. We don't really know. Maybe she was just commenting that they had run out of wine. We really don't know for sure. But it was likely that she knew that he had a power that was ready to be manifested. And she was probably thinking, you could do something about this. And so it's kind of a mother. It's a different side of Mary. It's a grown mother who is telling her son kind of what to do. Or at least that's one way we might read this. So she says they have no more wine. And we just have to sort of fill in the gaps. We don't know exactly what that means, but we do know that she is engaging him. She sees him as part of this situation. She's involving him, and he picks up on that.
Jesus responds, not in, oh, mother, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. I see Jenna comment on the fact that we kind of saw it from different angles. I see Mary as being a little bossy here, maybe. A typical Jewish mother telling a grown son what to do. She would be probably 45, 46 years old at this time. And by the standards of that time, getting to be an old woman because they didn't live very long. But she approaches Jesus, I think, in a way that says, I know you. And actually, we don't know how much she knew about him. We don't know. For the last time we saw Mary was when Jesus was 12 years old in the temple. And after that, we don't have the silent years intervene. So for 18 years until he was 30, we don't know about their relationship and where was Jesus. And I think she is assuming probably that there's a connection between them that, well, we're not sure. But Jesus responds to her by saying, and it can be translated several different ways, woman, and it's interesting that he says woman. He doesn't say mother. He says woman. Does this imply a distant relationship? Anyway, he says, no, like this, and I think this is the preferred translation. What does that have to do with you and me? I think that's probably the spirit in which he said it. My hour has not yet come. Always in the Gospel of John, well, the Gospel of John has layers of surface meaning and one underneath, many layers of meaning. And in the Gospel of John, the hour typically meant the hour of last revelation of who he was. It meant the cross. The supreme revelation of Jesus and his redemptive work is not turning the water into wine. That was a miracle. There were tricksters throughout the country that could do that. That wasn't what Jesus came to do, to be the miracle worker like that. My hour has not yet come. And I think he was also saying to her, you can't direct me now. You're not in charge of my life. My hour has not yet come. Jenna, how did Mary respond when he said this?
Yeah, and I just want to think a little bit about their relationship. It's so complicated. I mean, think about being the mother of Jesus. Like, just let that sit with you. I think we've oftentimes, we don't spend a ton of energy as Baptists on theology of Mary because we've sort of said, okay, that's a Catholic thing. We don't want to get too deep into who Mary was. But I think it's important, even as non-Catholics, for us to spend some time considering what it was like to bear the Son of God, and to have him grow up and be your son, to be part of you, and yet so beyond you. Mm-hmm. Think about what that would have been like. Many of you have adult children, and you know how complicated that relationship can be in and of itself, just in an average relationship. Think about now your son is the fulfillment of God's redemption in the world. And just put yourselves in her shoes for a moment, and how complicated you're figuring out what is my role in this. Is my role to step in and encourage him to live that out? I'm his mother. Is that my role? Or am I supposed to step back and really let God be the directing power here? Or is it somewhere in between? And so I think that's really where we see Mary wrestling with what her role is in parenting the divine. I mean, can you just imagine parenting Jesus? So when he says woman, I mean, you can kind of sense that he feels there's that tension here. He doesn't call her mother. He doesn't say, mama or a kind of a colloquial term for mother. He says woman. So, think about her. Think about having her grown son say, woman. You kind of see her going, okay, Jesus, like, okay, son, so there's that tension there. So, my translation says, dear woman, why do you involve me? So Emil prefers the version where it's, what does this have to do with you and me? There's other ways of seeing it too, that maybe Jesus is saying, why are you bringing this up to me? Why do you think that this matters to me? My time has not yet come. So then we're getting back to that. Is it time for his glory to really manifest? You can see that their words that they're exchanging, on the surface there's this dialogue, and then there's this whole under conversation, right? They're really talking about, is it time for him to come to his fruition as the Son of God? And she's wrestling with what's her role in helping that to happen. And yet we're reading all that into it. Really, she just said there's no more wine, and he says, woman. So we're always reading into Scripture, but that's part of the joy of Scripture, is that we get to enter into it and let the Spirit guide us as we read it. So
let me, as Mary hears this, and all that Jenna said is right. That is that wrestling, there's the dynamic that's complicated. But there's finally the resolution of it in that simple word. Now hear this. Mary says to the steward, do whatever he tells you to do. So that's Mary stepping back from it. That's Mary stepping back and saying, I'm not in charge. He is. Mm-hmm. And if I seem to be in charge, forgive me. He is in charge. Can I go ahead and let's do the big jar sitting there. And when we're told that there were 6 big jars sitting there that contained 20 to 30 gallons of water for the Jewish rite of purification. They were the waters by the door that you use for the cleansing of your feet, for the washing of your hands, or whatever the rite of purification called for. 6 jars. What does 6 say? What does 7 say? Oh, come on. What is 7? That's perfect. 7 is perfect. What is 6? Less than perfect, which means that it is evil. So we're reading that into it. We're not sure that's out there, but that comes to mind. And Jesus said, go fill these up to the brim. And they filled them up to the brim. Now take to the steward. And the steward tasted the water, now turned to wine. And he says to Jesus, or to the groom, you've done something really significant here. You've waited to the last to bring on the good stuff. And I know that you don't like to think about a wedding feast taking place and all of them getting drunk when Jesus was there, but that's what happens. Usually at the wedding feast, they all got pretty well lathered. And when they had, then they brought in bad stuff and said they don't know the difference between the good wine and the bad wine. And the steward said, now you've done it just the opposite. And so that got his attention. We're left to wonder, I think, surely this was more than just telling us that Jesus could turn water into wine. That's not why this was. Jenna, are you ready for me to kind of give a little zippy wrap up to that, or you got some more here? We're stepping out of character right here. Now you got.
Well, I just want to say a couple things.
You go ahead, then I'm going to wind her up.
Oh, we're winding her up. I get excited about Scripture. I'm like, let's talk about it.
You go ahead. Go ahead.
I think this story is just amazing. I think that when I initially read it, I just thought, oh, it's when Jesus turns water into wine, da-da-da-da. But the more I read it, I just saw these layers that I had never seen before. First of all, it's the servants that really see the miracle. The Scripture doesn't say that the whole party knows the miracle. We always picture that Jesus very publicly turns water into wine, but that's not what the story says. And I encourage y'all to go back and read it closely, because it actually says that the servants are the ones that see this being changed. And even the master of the feast doesn't know that it's Jesus that has changed the water into wine. The master just says to the bridegroom, "Oh, wow, you've saved." So think about how incredible that is, that Jesus' first miracle, the chance where he could have really blown it out of the water and said to the whole world, "This is who I am, and I'm amazing, and I'm so special." He doesn't do that. He does it in this subversive way where he does it with the servants. And the miracle is really for the disciples and his followers to start to believe in him. It's not to show off his majesty. It's not to say, "Hey, look at me, I'm so awesome." It's actually a very sort of subtle way of showing who he is, and yet it's still so powerful. And then, can I say two more things?
You go right ahead.
The other thing I want to say is that I want to talk about this water and wine imagery, because in Scripture there's always this surface layer of a story, and then there's the below surface. There's what's really going on. As Emil said, miracles. There were other miracle workers and tricksters, and that's not really the important part of the story. And what I actually think, this is my proposal, and y'all may disagree, but I think the wine has symbolism for the body and blood of Christ. Now, I don't usually go to that because I'm usually kind of like, don't make everything about the blood. But I actually think it's actually incredible that these jars were used by the Jews for ceremonial washing. So they're jars that were traditionally Jewish structures and tools. So what happens is Jesus uses the tradition, but he changes the water into wine. And so I think if you really got deep, you could read that this could be, I'm not saying it is for sure, but I'm saying it could be a further symbolism of Jesus taking what was the old tradition, and putting new life into it, his very life. And I think there's just some really beautiful symbolism there if you actually get deeper into the word. But that's pretty much what I want to say about that.
Okay, that's good. And by the way, that's good, Jenna. And I think it's exactly, in Scripture, what does it mean? Well, we start out with saying, what does it mean to you? And if this is the image that you come away with, this is valid, and it's legitimate. I find that the word that sticks with me more than any is the word new creation, New Jerusalem. You remember, who was it, 40 years ago, that in the midst of the charismatic movement and all that, wrote the book, The Taste of New Wine? Who was that? Well, Miller, was that? Well, anyway. The taste of new wine. You remember Jesus' comment about you don't put new wine in old wineskins? And I think that out of this simple story, and I think it is true that this is low key. Jesus didn't make a public announcement. See, I can turn water into wine. No, that's not what it was at all. It was kind of slipped in. Look at this and see what it means to you. Jesus did not condemn Jewish ceremonies. He did not condemn the ritual of purification. He entered into the practice of many of those himself. So he did not condemn. But they had served their purpose. That's the point. And now they're set aside. So it is with the ceremonial jars there for cleansing. The new has come. The new wine is what God gives to us. It's the Spirit. It has connotations of blood, to be sure. You have heard it. Jesus says to them in the Sermon on the Mount, you have heard it said by them of old, but I say unto you, something new has come. He did not condemn the old, but he moved beyond the old. A little signal that says a lot. The 6 jars that I mentioned a while ago, it says a lot. The 6 jars meant that they fell short of perfection. I'm not sure that's what the writer meant by enclosing, but it does come to mind. Not sure that he meant to say this is evil, but he meant to say this has not fulfilled its purpose. But this comes to mind. All of this has fallen short. None of this brings you to God. None of this brings you into a relationship with God. The rules and the regulations and the special commandments that are given to you, they're good, but they do not bring you to God. And that's what Paul says about the law. The law is good, but it does not bring you to God. No one is saved by keeping the law. And so this is another one of the subtle lessons about the Spirit. When Jesus says to the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman, they that worship God worship him in spirit and in truth. It is not about worshiping God here or in Jerusalem, but worshiping God in spirit. And I think we're hearing again that God's gift to us is the gift of the Spirit. When Jesus, in this later chapter in this same gospel, says to the apostles, the Spirit will come upon you and he will lead you to understand what I've been saying to you. He's talking about a personal relationship. What you and I deal with today and what I'm holding out for you is not some rule to follow, some regulation to keep, but a new understanding of the gift of the Spirit out of the relationship that God offers to us in his Son. All of that brings that to mind. That's not all that is out there teaching us, but it brings it to mind that God has brought the new, and the new will not pass away. Stop for a minute and just reflect on what you see. Do you see Jesus quietly telling them to do what they did, and then quietly listening to see how they responded? People went away from this time with a saying, I wonder what it means. And the gospel says they first believed in him. They came to know that he was somebody different. They didn't know all that he'd come to do, but they said, this is the one that we will follow. Today, I would like to leave you just with this, since I will not be here for the next 2 weeks. Will you understand that God gives to us the gift of his Spirit, by which he leads us to a relationship with him that's personal. That's personal. And this is what comes to light in this simple miracle, we might say. That God does not work through rules and regulations and commandments. They may be there. But what he gives to us that we might know him is the gift of his Spirit. And his Spirit leads us to come to know him as Father, as Creator, as the God who loves us, as the parent who enters into a relationship with us and will keep us. And I hope that will be on your heart in these days just ahead, that God's gift to us is the gift of himself. Jesus did not redeem the world by turning the water into wine. The world was redeemed by the offering of himself on the cross. That's his hour of glory. And that's the full revelation of God's heart, that he loves you with an everlasting love that cannot be taken away. Rather than singing the closing hymn, I would like to close with you just bowing for just a moment of reflection. Will you do that?